Good morning, Elohim. Good, happy Sabbath. The Sabbath was the first thing that God made holy in the Bible, in the Torah. So this is a personal Torah study for you and I and whoever else wants to take a reading and get to know themselves better by getting to know the characters better. This is the reading that we're going to go through on this side over here, and then we'll start a new one tomorrow, Sunday, the first day, finishing up on the Sabbath, the seventh day. All right. All right, this is the seventh reading, Genesis 22 1 through 22:24. Again, remember, put yourself in all of the characters' shoes. All right, that way, if you're female, you'll get a lot of male stuff in here. That doesn't make it right. And if you're male, you'll use your feminine energy to try and understand her. And with that, hopefully, we can get a better understanding of uh, the female male relationship and understanding one another. Are we going to get a complete one? No, but we'll open our minds a little bit better. How about that? All right. Abraham's greatest challenge came 37 years after his son Isaac was born. God commanded him to sacrifice Isaac. So basically, I'm gonna read through and then I'll go back and go back over some of this stuff. This is test. God said to Abraham, "Please take your son, your only one, the one you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah. Take him up there as an ascent offering on one of the mountains that I will designate to you." The primary aspect of this test was not the self sacrifice it entailed, but the challenge it posed to Abraham's implicit faith in God. God had promised to Abraham that Isaac would be the one to perpetuate his legacy. Now, God was commanding Abraham to sacrifice Isaac in seeming contradiction to his very own word. Yet, Abraham unquestioningly carried out God's command. God tests us in order to bring our hidden soul powers to the fore. In fact, life in general is such a test. Before it descended into this world, the soul related to God within the limits of reason. The soul never experienced a love for Him that transcends reason. But once the soul is encased in a physical body, which is by nature antagonistic to spirituality, it must summon its innermost strength to remain faithful to God despite life's daily trials and tribulations. With this newfound strength, the soul comes to understand and appreciate God in a much more profound and intimate way than it ever could have before descending into this world. And he gets that out of the Sefer Hama Memorandum. I don't know what that is, and it's 5700, page 37. I don't have access to that puppy there. All right, going back up to the top where Abraham's greatest challenge came 37 years after his son Isaac was born. All right, when I read the Bible, it sounds as though Isaac is a little kid or a little boy, but here this rabbi is telling us that he's about 37, or knows that he's 37 years old. So, uh, so it's a challenge for a father to have, or a parent, period, to have to sacrifice a child, and most of us do not, or do we, in some aspects. Also, now understanding that we were created from the very beginning, our spiritual soul. Uh, so, with that understanding as God, um, so as I was reading that, that kind of dinged me. So I wrote it down, and so I'm trying to, as I go through some of this stuff, to continue to try and journal and write stuff down. This was at like 8 a.m. When we think we conversate with Elohim or we conversate with God. Now, that's bordering on the line of fucking crazy, right? So, uh, but we all think that's not crazy. Uh, Talking to ourselves is crazy, but that is the part of us that we can listen to the good side or the bad side. That's not necessarily crazy. That's basically we have a choice in everything. And so, are we listening to that good side or are we listening to that bad side? And if Abraham is Elohim, what was it in him that made him think he needed to sacrifice his son? Well, the rabbi goes on to say the primary aspect of this test was not the self sacrifice it entailed, but the challenge it posed to Abraham's implicit faith in God. God had promised Abraham that Isaac would be the one to perpetuate his legacy. Carry on. There would be Abraham would have as many children as there are stars in the sky or sand, on the beach. Uh, so now, God was commanding Abraham to sacrifice Isaac in seeming contradiction to his very own word. Yet Abraham questionably carried God's command. God tests us in order to bring out our hidden soul powers to the fore. So, what we have to also understand is that we are Elohim, which is God with skin, God on earth, as Jesus was. He said as much as Mary was his mother, his spiritual mother, and we were his spiritual brothers. Uh, so, God tests us in order to bring our hidden soul powers to the fore. In fact, in general, is such a test. Before it descended into this world, the soul related to God within the limits of reason. The soul never experienced a love for him that transcends reason. But once the soul is encased in a physical body, our meat suits, which is by nature antagonistic to spirituality. Basically, our meat suits, that's our ego, all right? And it's gonna it's gonna battle with spirituality. So my ego can't understand the concept of how and why a man would do this to his son. Why God? Because also in Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, right? So you don't sacrifice human beings. Um, and if you go back to God, you should put no other god before me. Uh, but yet you're going to kill your son, which is God as well, right? So that one way or another, with that it goes against what God was telling us. But once the soul is encased in a physical body, which is by nature antagonistic to spirituality, it must summon its innermost strength to remain faithful to God despite God's despite life's daily trials and tribulations. With this newfound strength, the soul comes to understand and appreciate God in a much more profound and intimate way than it could have ever before sending into this world. Now, from Isaac's point of view, I'm 37 years old, and I'm asking, well, where's the sacrifice? And my dad's asking me to get up on the altar. Uh, I love my dad, right? He means everything to me. I don't have a family yet. Um, I help him do everything on as far as, outside work and everything. What's up, with this, but that would take an amount of faith right there as well. Um, I know I'd be questioning, hell, what the hell are you doing, pops? Where this doesn't make sense to me, and that's from an egoic standpoint. From a spiritual standpoint, I think we have to look at it as giving up something dear to us. And when we think abundantly, we're not necessarily thinking in anything in particular. We're trying not to. We do have specific things, but yet we try to blank that part out as much as we can. Now he had another son, Ishmael, uh, and when we look down the road and some of the new information that's come out, where 80% of the 80% of the Jews leaving were uh, Egypt, and mostly Egyptians that were enslaved, but and other folks. Uh, Abraham would probably have to have said, "Well, I love this other son as well," and so there's a dual aspect, and we're able to think about that and contemplate that. But we have to give up stuff, and we have to give up these physical bodies in a sense of not, you're not going to mutilate yourself or anything stupid like that. I think it's just a way of showing us, in order to be more complete spiritually, we have to be willing to give up everything physically, including our kids. My son's on hospice. I can't save him. All I can do is pray for him, right, and tell him what I'm reading and whatnot. Um, I can't save anybody. So we have to be able. I think for me, right, this is your personal Bible. But I'm just telling you how I think. Uh, it's just a matter of being more authentically who you are. And for me, I'm learning that, and have been learning that. We're all learning that. And am I willing to give up everything, right? And so, and that's where we're all at. And I think Eve was a perfect example of that, when she gave up her perfectionist and said, I'll sacrifice. Now we're gonna have to, but it was just her and him that were perfect. Everybody else on the outside world was struggling. And so when she did that, she was like, well, I'll lose everything in order to give them spirituality and overcome whatever loss the world is going through at this time that let us make man in our image. All right, there's a bunch of meat suits out there doing stuff and working, building pyramids and stuff like that. But I think at that time there were a set of individuals or something else that were God and were lording over men in that area in the wrong way. And so I think that is why that was a time when she was needed to do her thing. And these days, it's not an individual, but God the Father has opened and lightened up the veil for us to become reawakened, or as Christians have been looking forward to the rapture. Uh, that is the time that we are in. This is the messianic area. It is easier for us to communicate with God um, right now in this area, that in this era, and on this day, actually, 11/8, than it has been ever in history since Eve did her thing. And so that's why reason why she is the mother of the world. She gave up her perfection, right, in order to live a regular life. And if we think about, they knew that they were naked. Mankind was running around with clothes on, and so that's the reason why they knew they were fucking naked. How would you know if you're naked if you're the only two on Earth, right? All right. Love y'all. Y'all have a good one.